Good day. It is May 31st, 2024. This is the first of our weekly turf team times from the Ohio State Turfgrass team. Online today with Dr. David Gardner, Dr. David Shetlar, and believe it or not, Todd Hicks is somewhere thereabouts with Dr. Gardner, and we'll see him in a minute. Dr. Gardner, can you give us a weed update, please?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Let me share my screen real quick. So I got an email earlier this week asking about low volatility esters because the complaint was that amine-based formulations don't work as well sometimes. And while that is the case in cooler weather, one thing to remember is that in warmer weather, the amine formulation is what we prefer. And with the esters, there are some of them that, are longer chain esters, and so they're reduced volatility, but you still have to be careful when using them to avoid damage to non-target plants such as trees and shrubs. But the bigger issue, I'll tell you this story. Last year for Field Day, I did a demonstration with all of the latest and greatest four-way herbicides that contained esters, and I compared that to a three-way standard. And the three-way standard ended up controlling the weeds very well, whereas the ones that the plots where I used the more expensive herbicides that included an ester formulation didn't control well. And what I attributed that to was that when I started that trial for that demonstration, it was 80 degrees and sunny. In those instances with that kind of weather, those formulations only remain wet on the leaf for about 10 minutes, which isn't enough time to get the herbicide into the plant in a sufficient concentration to actually give good control. So you absolutely can have a situation where not only will the esters increase the likelihood of non-target injury, but you'll get less control of the weeds when using those in temperatures that are too warm. So generally speaking, I tell people to avoid application of all broadleaf herbicides when temperatures are above 80 degrees, but do especially be careful with any of the herbicides that you're using that contain an ester in them. Something else is that now that the month of May is drawn to a close, probably most of your broadleaf herbicides are out. And just a reminder that herbicide resistance is an issue that while it has long been a problem in production agriculture, it's something that we've largely ignored in turfgrass, but it's becoming a real issue. It is more frequently reported in turf. And so weeds like crabgrass, goosegrass, buckhorn plantain, ground ivy, and annual bluegrass are known to be resistant to some of the chemicals that we use to attempt to control those. So my point is that if you've made an application and you go back to the site and none of the weeds are controlled, well, that's your clue that you did it wrong. But if you do return to that site and all of the weeds are controlled except for one particular species that is on the label, there's a chance that you have a resistance issue. And so the challenge there is that you can't just spray more of that same product. That's not going to work. You can't even change to a different chemical in the same class of chemistry. It has to be a herbicide with a different mode of action. And most of our broadleaf herbicide combination products are all formulated with herbicides that have the same mode of action. So some of the newer herbicides that are meant to control grasses like topramazone or sedges, like the newly released Archon, for example, if you look at the label, broadleaf weeds are listed on those. And in fact, those products do work. It's just they tend to be a little bit more expensive on a per acre basis compared to our four-way formulations. But if you do have a resistance issue, you should, try to verify that that is in fact the problem, but then, reach out to us and we can help with potential alternative herbicides that you can use to try to get control. Ground ivy is something else that I'm getting emails about. So remember that's occasionally confused with mallow, which is a taprooted species and more visible as we get later into the summer, whereas ground ivy tends to spread by runners, which is why it's so good at taking over large swaths of your turf. The herbicide options for ground ivy, otherwise known as creeping Charlie, honestly, the recommendations, might vary depending on, the population that you're dealing with, where you are, but we generally recommend 3 or 4-way herbicides that contain triclopyr, dicamba, quinclorac, and or fluroxypyr. Something else that you can consider trying, though, is the more recently released herbicide Sure Power, which includes one of the active ingredients is flumioxazin. And so that's not something that we've traditionally used in cool season turf because there can be some injury issues, but flumioxazin works really, really well on ground ivy. And if you apply Shore Power at the right times of the year, you can minimize that injury to the turf. Now, the tricky thing this year is that it has been very wet and, like more ideal for the growth of cool season grass. And so this flumioxazin, you tend to see less injury when the turf grass is green but not actively growing. You're not having to mow, more than once every week to 10 days. Right now in central Ohio, at least, we're having to mow quite often. And so that would be an example of a time that we would not want to use that particular product. So we want to wait until it's a little bit warmer. And the grass growth has slowed down a little bit. So the thing is that product tends to have more injury potential on newly emerging, expanding leaf tissue, whereas if it's hardened off, then you have less injury. So Shore Power is an option, but you want to wait until after the growth of the cool season grass has slowed down a bit. I'm also starting to see this weed a little bit earlier than typical. There's a lot of things that are about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule this year, it seems like, compared to most years, but this is American burnweed. And so this is a summer annual that actually gets up to 2.5 meters in height. And typically you wouldn't see this in a mowed turf situation, but it seems like it's becoming a more frequent occurrence because it will survive a mowing or two. But to control this, maintain your mowing schedule. So, it tends to be more of a problem in turf at those times of the year that you're not mowing as frequently. But you can also use repeat applications of either three-way herbicides and or triclopyr in order to try to get control of that. The last thing that I want to mention is that this is what field pass palum looks like as of today, whereas in turfgrass areas, at least out at the OTF Center today, crabgrass is still 2 to 3 leaf stage and no more than 1/4 to 1/2 an inch tall. And so if you see big fat leaves poking out of the ground that are 4 to 6 inches in height, there's a decent chance that it's field pass palum. And so this is something that I'll talk about next week, a little bit more about the control of this, because there is a very good product for this, topramazone, but there have been some modifications to the label and the recommendations for how to do that. And those applications are meant to be done more late in the summer, which is why I'm not going to talk about it this week. So, Ed, that is what I have for today.
Roger that. Todd Hicks, how you doing?
I'm doing well, except for a new computer that I can't seem to figure out. So give me another month or so, it'll be fine, I'm sure. Good day, everybody. On the disease front, as Dave mentioned, everything, as we've been talking about since we've been doing these, everything is 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. So we've seen a wide band of diseases that we normally don't see this time of year taking effect in certain parts of Ohio. The good news is Mother Nature gave us a reprieve, a reset button. This cold weather pattern that came in kind of stopped most things, kind of put a hold on things. These last couple of days, it's been much, much warmer, so things are starting to kick off. So far, I'm seeing red thread everywhere on high cut. If it's weak turf, you're going to see red thread. We've seen leaf spot on everything, including bent grass. I got 2 samples this week, one from a green, one from a T. So that's chewing away and will be present throughout the summer. And dollar spots kicked back up. The last 2 mornings, we've had mycelium out here at the research center. So those 3 things are really cooking right now. Minimum, if I was starting my spray program, I would be protected for dollar spot and leaf spot for sure. If I had the extra money, I'd look out on my radar for what I think is going to be coming next. And those are 3 different things. Number 1, the thing that really worries me is anthracnose. People are still behind trying to play catch up on their mowing, their spraying regimes. Everybody's been or has had some kind of opening tournament for their members. So things have been pushed kind of hard. You couple that with weather going back between 40-some degree nights and 80-some degree days, which we're going to have. That's a lot of stress put on your turf. Leaves us wide open for anthracnose. So I might put something in there for anthracnose. I'm a little worried about brown patch showing up way, way earlier than normal, but that's usually one we can cure up pretty easy. And the final one, again, it's fairly easy, or you can't do anything about it, is ferreting. I saw it a month ago in high cut turf in Southern Ohio and in Central Ohio. It seemed to disappear with this fluctuating weather pattern, but we turned a little dry and a little hot. It's going to show back up again. So be prepared when you see that one show up. That's all the good news from my end.
Thanks, Todd, with all the pestilence and the technology glitches, we still got it done. So appreciate it. It's nice that you and Dave are in the same stadium together. Hi, Dave. With some sensibility and sanity, Dr. Dave Shetlar with insect update.
Okay. Actually, I've got a question now that Dave's come back in. I don't know if we covered this recently, but if you go to the garden stores now or any of the garden centers, you're going to see a big display of Roundup for lawns and a bunch of other Roundup products. If you check those products, virtually every one of them no longer has glyphosate in them. And most of them have a significant amount of triclopyr in those. And from the ornamental area, I want to warn people that remember glyphosate, when it hit an organic molecule of some sort, it's stuck. It will not move. And so when it hits a clay, a soil particle, it's stuck there. But these other materials that are in the current Roundup brand are highly mobile. And if you've got tree roots or shrub roots or things like that, we're already beginning to see a little bit of evidence of that. People are saying, my tree just didn't leaf out very well, or my shrub's got small leaves on it. It just doesn't look very good. And we ask them, well, did you use a little Roundup to edge your flower bed or something like that? And so be very cautious about that. Dave, I don't know if you want to make a comment on that or not.
I think I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. And you weren't on the call, but yeah, to reiterate, the newer Roundup non-selective formulation is two of the active ingredients are fluazephat butyl, which is an excellent grass herbicide, and then triclopyr, which is an excellent broadleaf herbicide. However, as Dave mentioned, neither of those bind tightly to organic matter. And so you're not going to be able to use the new non-selective formulations the way that you were able to use glyphosate. So one of the ramifications is extra caution and or no use at all in ornamental settings. The other one is that when it comes time to reestablish by seed in the summer, we would typically tell people to apply glyphosate, and then, the label says wait 7 days and then you can apply your seed. Honestly, that 7-day window was in case you grossly over applied and you had free glyphosate in the soil solution because, there weren't enough binding sites on the soil. Usually you could get away, if you knew what you were doing, you could get away with putting the seed down the day after you made the glyphosate application. But if you look at the new label, they're saying 4 weeks. Because the triclopyr and the fluazephat will leave a residual that lasts for that length of time. And so that's something else that people are going to have to be cognizant of, is that, those products work well, but there are some ramifications to their use that didn't exist back when, the non-selective Roundup formulation included glyphosate. Now, the thing that's really unfortunate is that in a lot of stores right now, you can buy both the glyphosate-based formulation and the newer formulation. And they're like basically 2 shelves apart from each other. So, just be very careful when reading the label. Make sure that you know what formulation that you have, because there are some big differences in how you would use those products. Still very effective, but some big differences in how you would use them.
Now, concerning the bug update, Dr. Wu is telling me that the annual bluegrass weevil is proceeding very rapidly, and where we would normally see damage, let's say in the first or second week of June, we're seeing damage now. And so only rescue treatments for the annual bluegrass weevil would be effective and maybe knocking out some of those larger larvae with those. Hopefully she'll give us an update on that next week. And the other and sort of the higher cut turf grass, Our old friend, the bluegrass billbug, has been laying eggs pretty extensively, and now you might start seeing some of the damage. You'll see just little irregular spots turning brown. If you go over and do what we call the tug test, grab a hold of some of those stems that are turning brown, pull on them. If they break off very easily and you check in the stems and there's little fine sawdust-like material, that's billbug poop. And so doing the tug test will confirm that you've got a billbug damaging area. Again, it would be a little bit difficult, the large larvae, a little bit difficult to control, but we do know that something like Ference, our old friend Dilox, carbaryl, if you've got access to carbaryl or 7, and my favorite neonicotinoid, clothianidin or arena, can still kill off some of those bigger billbug larvae and do a little rescue treatment for those and save your turf from further damage from those. Right now, most of the Japanese beetles and the mast chafers are in the pupal stage. I don't see any flooding rains coming over the next week or two. And what that means is that the pupae will probably survive very well. I'm expecting the adults of both of those beetles probably as early as the second week of June, beginning to come out and starting to lay eggs. And so remember, when it comes to our white grub treatments, if you're going to be using imidacloprid or Merit-like products, some of those generics, we recommend putting them down at peak egg lay. And so that's probably going to be the last 2 weeks of June would be the best time to do that. But we do also know that if you're going to use the cheaper products of imidacloprid for grub control, that there is some curative capability. So the last 2 weeks of June through most of July should give you very good control using those Merit or imidacloprid-like products. We've been hearing people are having trouble with it, and when I investigate when they put it down, they typically put their imidacloprid down in late May or early June. And basically it's just running out of steam. The residual effect is just running out of its ability to kill those little first instars when they hatch out. Obviously, if you switch to any of the diamides, things like aceleperin or Ference or tetrino, those have much longer residual capabilities, and you can put those down early enough to get your bill bugs and get your white grubs later on. When it comes to the chinch bugs, haven't heard any screaming and hollering yet, but I suspect they will show up. Dr. Wu and I are looking for some chinch bug study sites. So for those of you that are in the lawn care, if you do find one of your neighborhoods that's got some chinch bug activity in it, we'd like to hear from you. We'll try not to abuse your customer and putting out these test plots, but we are looking for some newer places to do some testing of some of the newer insecticides on chinch bugs. That's my report for this week.
Thank you, Dave. One thing we want to make clear, folks, while we mentioned a lot of chemistries, the majority of these materials, we do know the homeowners take a look at the videos, but the majority of the stuff may be restricted use pesticides. And so this is something that professionals in the main should be applying. If you are a homeowner who's considering using any of these chemistries, we would ask you to reach out to make sure that we can give you some guidance. If you are going to misapply or not apply stuff according to the label, we don't take any responsibility for that. Following the label is the law, and that is a critical part to using any of these materials. So again, if you are listening in on the homeowner side of it and you're a person who's interested in DIY material, please reach out to us before you think about using any of these materials directly. The professionals, of course, you are well aware of virtually all these materials we're discussing. From my standpoint, I'm sitting here in Ireland, the sun is shining, it's green, it's been raining, and there's no problems. We don't see any disease on this side of the world. With that, we will see you all next week, and we'll talk to you going forward. Thank you, folks. Enjoy the weekend.